Before we dive into today's powerful Western tale, imagine this. A cowboy riding through a deadly storm suddenly finds a lost Apache girl alone on the plains, and what he discovers next changes everything. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, share this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive on this channel. Now settle in, turn up the volume, and let's get started with this story. The wind carved across the empty plains like a cold warning, sweeping dust over the long stretch of grass as Cole Maddox rode slow, scanning the land with the instinct of a man who'd lived too many years in the wild. His horse snorted softly beneath him, uneasy for reasons Cole couldn't yet place. The sky had begun shifting to a heavy silver, the color that foretold a storm forming somewhere past the horizon. Cole loosened his reins, eyes narrowing as he leaned forward, listening for anything out of place. Then he heard it, a thin, frightened cry swallowed almost instantly by the rising wind. Cole stiffened, his hand hovering near his holster, not for danger but for certainty. He turned his horse toward the sound, getting it down a small dip in the land where tall grass bent in restless waves. Again the cry came, softer this time, broken, desperate. Cole dismounted before the horse fully stopped, his boots sinking into damp earth as he stepped toward a fallen log half covered in brush. There, curled tightly against the wood, was a small Apache girl no older than 9 or 10. Her dress was torn, her feet bare and scraped, her hair matted with dust and rain. She looked up at him with terrified eyes, shrinking back like she expected a blow. Cole raised his hands gently, voice dropping low. "Easy, easy now," he whispered. "You're all right. I won't hurt you." The girl shook her head, whispering something in Apache, the same word again and again, "Mother." Cole understood enough to feel the ache behind it. He removed his coat and wrapped it around her carefully, feeling how cold she'd become. The first drops of rain struck his hat, heavy and cold. He lifted her into his arms, her trembling body pressing instinctively against him for warmth. "It's all right, little one. I've got you." She didn't resist this time. Cole mounted his horse with her held against his chest, gripping the reins with one hand. The wind intensified, carrying the sharp scent of rain and lightning as the storm broke open across the plains. By the time Cole reached the narrow canyon he'd used many times for shelter, the sky unleashed its full fury. Rain poured in fierce sheets, hammering the earth, and thunder rolled so violently that the horse shuddered beneath him. Inside the shallow cave, Cole built a fire as quickly as he could, his hands moving with practiced urgency. The girl sat near the flames, still wrapped in his coat, her eyes reflecting the flickering light like those of a scared fawn struggling to stay alert. "What's your name?" Cole asked gently once she stopped shaking. For a long moment she said nothing, only watching him with quiet suspicion. Then, barely loud enough to hear, she whispered, "Naira." Cole nodded with a small, reassuring smile. "That's a pretty name." She didn't smile back, but some of the fear in her eyes eased. He tore a strip from his blanket to wrap her feet and handed her a piece of dried meat. She devoured it as if she hadn't eaten in days. Cole studied her, wondering what could have led a child this young so far from home. Apache territory wasn't close, and traveling alone across open plains was suicide for even a grown man. "You're lost," he murmured, mostly to himself. Naira looked down, sadness clouding her eyes. She whispered something again, pointing weakly toward the southeast. Cole understood. She needed to go home, and she needed someone who wouldn't abandon her along the way. Night settled over the canyon like a heavy blanket, the storm still rumbling in the distance. Cole kept the fire alive and wrapped a second blanket around Naira's shoulders. She eventually leaned against him, her eyes drifting shut from exhaustion. Cole remained awake, listening to the storm and thinking about the risks he'd be taking come morning. Escorting her home meant crossing into Apache territory, and that meant walking straight into a world where a cowboy like him was more enemy than friend. But leaving her out here wasn't an option, not for any man with a conscience. By dawn the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Naira looked stronger now, her breathing steady, her eyes clearer though still watchful. Cole saddled his horse and lifted her up carefully. "Let's get you back where you belong," he said softly. She held onto him as they rode out of the canyon, the sun rising weakly behind dark clouds that still threatened more rain. Hours passed as they traveled across broken land, dry riverbeds, and clusters of desert shrubs. Cole stayed alert, knowing they were nearing Apache lands. The slightest mistake could be seen as a threat. As they approached a stand of cottonwood trees, Naira suddenly tapped his arm and pointed forward. her expression shifting from fear to recognition. Cole reined his horse to a stop and scanned the trees. Shapes emerged, silent, steady, disciplined Apache warriors. At least 7 of them stepped into view, their faces painted with dust and purpose, their bows and rifles held with calm readiness. Cole didn't move. He lifted his hands slowly, keeping his voice level. "I brought her home. She was lost. That's all." The warriors exchanged words in low, melodic tones. One stepped forward, a tall man with sharp eyes and a commanding presence. His gaze dropped to Naira, and the tension in his shoulders loosened slightly. The warrior gestured for Cole to follow. Cole nudged his horse forward, moving with deliberate calm as they guided him through rocky paths toward a small settlement hidden beyond a ridge. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Children played near hide-covered lodges. Women worked in quiet rhythm. It was peaceful, alive, grounded in its own world. Cole had known all along that the stories told by fearful settlers were only half-truths at best. And then he saw her. A woman stepped from one of the lodges, her presence so striking it seemed the entire village turned subtly toward her. She walked with quiet strength, her long dark hair braided with feathers and beads, her clothing adorned with careful, beautiful embroidery. Her eyes locked onto Naira, and in an instant, everything in her face transformed into raw emotion Cole had never witnessed before. And that was how he first saw the stunning Apache widow, whose life had been shattered just days before, and who had feared she would never see her daughter again. The moment Naira saw the woman, she slipped from Cole's arms and ran toward her with a small cry that broke into a sob. The widow dropped to her knees, catching her daughter in an embrace so fierce and trembling that Cole felt something shift inside his chest. She whispered rapid words in Apache, her hands moving over Naira's face and hair, as if making sure she was real. Relief, grief, and overwhelming love blended across the woman's features, softening her strong jaw and steady posture into something fragile. The warriors observed silently, their expressions unreadable, but Cole could feel the weight of their attention on him. When the widow finally looked up, her dark eyes fixed on Cole with an intensity that pierced deeper than any blade. She rose slowly, Naira's small hand still clutched in hers. One of the warriors spoke to her in low tones, explaining what had happened. The widow listened without interruption, her gaze occasionally drifting back to Cole. When the man finished, she stepped forward, stopping only a few paces away from him. She spoke in broken English, her voice soft but steady. "You found my daughter." Cole nodded, keeping his body still respectful. "Found her lost in the storm, cold, hungry. I just wanted to bring her home." The widow's eyes softened, though the grief behind them didn't fade. "My name is Shea," she said with a small nod. Cole touched the brim of his hat lightly. "Cole Maddox." Her expression shifted, like she had heard that name somewhere before, though she said nothing. Shea gestured for him to follow her to a shaded area near her lodge. The warriors kept their distance, but remained watchful. Naira stayed beside her mother, but her eyes kept flicking back toward Cole with a shy sort of curiosity. As they sat, Shea spoke haltingly, her English pieced together with effort. "4 days ago raiders came. Not my people, men from the south. They took our horses, burned our food, and my daughter ran when the fire grew. I was fighting to protect the others." She thought Naira had been taken or killed. Cole listened quietly, the truth settling into him with a weight he hadn't expected. The child had fled into the plains on foot, terrified and alone, and wandered far beyond the reach of her people. The storm that nearly killed her had been the last piece of cruelty in a 4-day nightmare. Cole let out a long breath. "She's safe now." Shea bowed her head slightly. "Because of you, many would not help a child of my people. Many would leave her. You did not." Her voice wavered just barely. Cole looked out at the village, the smoke drifting under the afternoon sun. "I couldn't have ridden past her," he said. "Not ever." Naira slipped closer to him then, clutching his coat and murmuring something to her mother in their language. Whatever she said made Shea's eyes soften even more. She translated quietly. "She says she wants to thank you herself." Naira looked up at him shyly and pressed her small hand to his arm with a gentle whisper. Cole felt something tighten in his throat. The tension in the village eased gradually. The warriors lowered their guard, recognizing him as a protector rather than a threat. Some of the women approached with food, corn cakes, dried meat, and a broth fragrant with herbs. Cole accepted only a little, but the gesture touched him deeply. Hospitality was not given lightly to an outsider, especially in such times. Shea remained near him, speaking occasionally, learning his words, and offering brief, quiet smiles that felt like sunlight after days of storm. As the sun began to set, Cole knew he had to leave. The Apache lands were not meant for cowboys to linger in, no matter the goodwill shared. He stood and adjusted his saddle. Shea approached him, Naira at her side. "You are leaving," she said softly, not as a question but as an understanding. Cole nodded. "It's not my place to stay." Shea lowered her gaze, fingers brushing her daughter's hair. "I wish I could repay you, but what you gave me, nothing can match it." Cole shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything." She looked at him then, truly looked, as if seeing the kind of man he was beneath the dust and the silence. In another life, perhaps their worlds could have crossed without so many barriers. She stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his forearm in a gesture filled with gratitude and something deeper, unspoken. "You saved my heart, Cole Maddox," she whispered. "That is not a small thing." Naira hugged him suddenly, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Cole knelt so he could return the gesture, his voice rough. "Take care of your mother." She nodded fiercely, like she understood the importance of the promise. When Cole rose, Shea stepped forward and pressed a small beaded bracelet into his palm. "For protection," she murmured, "and to remember you walk with friends here." Cole closed his fingers around it, feeling the warmth of her hand linger. He mounted his horse slowly, unwilling to rush the moment. Shea held Naira close, both of them watching him with expressions he knew he would never forget. The warriors gave him respectful nods. As he turned his horse toward the open plains, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the land, Cole took one last look at them, at the woman whose beauty was matched only by her strength, and the child whose life he'd been destined to cross. He rode away with the rhythm of the land beneath him and a quiet ache in his chest, knowing he had left something precious behind. But he also carried something with him, a bond forged in danger, trust, and gratitude, a reminder that even on the harshest frontier, humanity still had a place. And though he did not look back again, Cole Maddox knew that somewhere among the cottonwoods and the painted lodges, an Apache widow and her daughter remembered him with the same quiet fire that now lived in his own heart.